Lots of sunlight today again, although it is kind of hazy in the sky. Makes me wonder if some of the smoke from other areas are starting to creep in. And what's going on today? I was reading this at first, which kind of reminded me of that thought where a lot of these over-the-top drone regulations and stuff like that, unfortunately, a lot of people, it seems like, are potentially taking advantage of it for commercial reasons. Because in reading an article like this, it's kind of misleading. I can see how many people would interpret what this person says as the actual, I guess, rules by itself without commercial interest. This one says, people need a license to fly a drone over Regina, expert says. It says here, after seeing breathtaking footage on social media of city skylines and natural landscapes, more and more people are becoming interested in drones. Ryan Beston, the owner and operator of Queen City Drone Productions and Training, told Greg Morgan Morning Show on Tuesday, people need to obtain a drone license before they can fly over Regina. If people fly out of town and have a drone under 249 grams, they can do whatever they want. Beston said, once you get into the city, it's controlled airspace. What the heck? Like, I can see people reading that, for example, implying, oh, you can't fly your micro drone around a quote city and stuff now because it's quote controlled airspace. You can technically fly a micro drone in controlled airspace. It depends more on, for example, are there additional restrictions for all aircraft in general? No flying during this particular period. Which gets into the thought of, why do people say this? And maybe this is the reason. It says here, he added his company offers training courses to help people get their drone license. We provide $20,000 worth of drones for all students to fly, the owner said. Not only are they learning the paperwork part about it, they're actually getting the real-time experience flying a drone. I mean, that's fine and dandy, so to speak, in terms of if you offer a service in that way to charge whatever you want. But again, when reading this, I can see how most people will be kind of misled about it. Since this was a radio interview, I was thinking, okay, maybe some of this stuff is taken out of context. It's just taking little bits and pieces, for example, of what the person said. But in actually listening to the actual radio interview as well, there's just so many points there that the person mentioned where I can easily see how people can interpret what this quote expert says to be the actual, let's just say, rules and so forth. For example, there were some parts where it sounded like the interviewer asked, oh, how much does it cost to get licensed? And he starts saying, like, for example, what, hundreds of dollars? I'm like, what in the world?
Oh, that's cool. So you need a license. How much does that cost to get?
In Regina, Canada, the license is $350 for the basic license and $700 for the advanced.
So as a hobbyist, do I really need a license?
Yes.
It's the law.
You know, what happens is people will start off in fields out of town, but then they start wanting to get the nice shots, like the downtown of because the license works all over Canada. So you can take it on your vacation, you can get those amazing shots, but you need your license unless you just want to fly in the field.
So in context of thinking about that, he means what he offers in his business. For example, for people to get, let's just say, a basic or advanced license. But again, I can easily see how regular people listening to that, they'll think, oh, that's how much it actually costs, like just standard for you to do that test and all that. And I did try to listen to that part too, where they talked about, oh, if you have like a micro drone, for example, it's perfectly fine. But as soon as you get to like a city of sorts, then the guy kind of changes his tune, which again, I can kind of see you playing with words in that way to say, well, technically it is more, I guess, complicated in that zone, but technically, if there's no other, let's just say, huge federal ban on a certain area and all that, then they could fly it technically as well. And again, like there, I think there's kind of a conflict of interest because it feels like for many of these people, it's their, I guess, motivation to try to say, take our courses, this and that, pay hundreds of dollars.
All right, where can I get in trouble with a drone here in Regina?
You need your license to fly for sure, but if you fly out of town and you have a drone under 249 grams, you're able to
just do whatever you want.
Yeah, outside of the city.
Yeah.
Once you get into the city, it's controlled airspace. That's when it gets a little more complicated, and that's what we go into on the training.
Obviously, that wouldn't sound as good for our company, I would imagine, anyways, where if someone asks you, how much does it cost to actually take the test to get, quote, I guess, licensed if you pass it and all that, we offer you, like, for example, I don't know, $200 to $700 courses, like that type of thing, for you to learn how to pass that. Like, that would be crazy, I would imagine, for most people to say, which would explain why they don't mention it that way, but at the same time, again, I can see how an average individual would assume hundreds of dollars per se is kind of the base fee. Just like, let's just say if you were taking I don't know, a driving exam or something like that. All these schools and stuff, they don't tell you how much it is if you just decide to do it by yourself, that type of thing. Now, trying to give the benefit of the doubt of sort, they even imply in the interview, for example, there's a time crunch of sort. They're interviewing the guy really quickly, so you can't exactly go into details. But just in general, the answers that the person gave is very typical of what people would hear from a quote experts, especially when there's a conflict of interest. I would say personally, when it comes to people selling courses and so forth, they're not entirely accurate in the sense of what it is, bare bones. It's more geared towards what they, I guess, benefit from. For example, someone taking a course and all that, and that's a little unfortunate. In relation to that topic though, which is a little unfortunate when I think about it, if that's the path you want to go in terms of, let's just say, getting the advanced license and all that, I often get messages where people ask me, can I recommend somebody, for example, who does that? Unfortunately, the only person that I would think of in terms of is, okay, they're against over-the-top regulations, for example, they want it to be accessible, is that person, if you remember, the armed forces gentleman that did my test and so forth. Unfortunately, he doesn't want to do it for commercial reasons. And so I'm trying to think, is there a company that I could stand by in that case, or a person other than that? And I can't really think of one, because just from my basic research, virtually almost everyone that I can think of, there's some kind of conflict of interest in there, or they promoted over-the-top regulations. Now you may say like, oh my god, that's crazy, everybody like that? Again, if you know someone, let me know. But ultimately, just from what I've seen, I mean, in terms of like fake gurus or lobbyists, I mean, really do your research yourself if you want. Look at, for example, was this person or this company or whatever, were they promoting over-the-top regulations in the beginning, saying, this is fantastic, drones are so dangerous, these guys, yes, we need to restrict them? Or at the same time, was the person like a fake guru where they started selling you courses and materials, for example, when, let's just say, they didn't even have, I don't know, the license or something like that? Were there people, for example, selling advanced courses when they didn't even have the advanced license because ultimately they saw a business opportunity? So that was the little unfortunate thing I was thinking about. I just can't think of anyone who's actually genuinely wants, for example, reasonable, logical regulations when it comes to things like drones, where if you offer a business, for example, you're teaching people how to fly, then be my guest. But from what I've seen, there's just too many fake gurus, for example, like people who fake it till they make it, or at the same time just lobbyists. That's a little unfortunate. With that conflict of interest too, I found before and still true today, a lot of people who say, oh, you don't fly here and there, even though legally they could. Often enough, when it comes to things like people police droning, it's people who try to use things like drones as a competitive advantage commercially, because in their field they weren't very good at what it is they did before in terms of, I guess, standing out from other people. For example, not everyone, but like a photographer. Imagine a photographer not doing very well in their business to stand out, so afterwards they thought, hey, I can stand out with drones, I'm the only one doing it. So now, as more people can do it themselves, let's just say they're flying things like a micro drone, they have to try everything in their ability to suppress them, because now they lose their, I guess, competitive advantage per se, because they can't compete with other, I guess, photographers with just, let's say, a plain camera. So they have to try to restrict people with the drones because that was their only, I guess, glory to fame, if that's what you want to say. That's what I've seen personally anyways, in terms of things like conflict of interest and people giving, I guess, these types of information that could be easily interpreted as, oh, I guess that is the quote law, versus it's more about them, I guess. And with that thought, actually, in terms of there's so much, let's just say in particular fields, fake gurus, lobbyists or whatever, they just want to take people's money. How about this story? It relates to that one, if you guys remember, with that Elizabeth Holmes, where she's going to jail now for all that scandal about that Theranos testing company. Well, this one here says, Elizabeth Holmes arrives at federal prison in Texas to begin 11-year sentence. Elizabeth Holmes, the disgraced founder of blood testing company Theranos, turned herself in on Tuesday. So she's finally, I guess, getting booked, huh? It says Elizabeth Holmes, the disgraced founder of blood testing company Theranos, turned herself in Tuesday to begin serving out her 11-year, 3-month prison sentence, the Bureau of Federal Prisons confirms to People. Holmes, 39, reported to federal prison camp Bryan in Texas, a minimum security prison facility that houses 655 female offenders. The prison is about 100 miles from Houston, where she grew up. According to its handbook, inmates will have job assignments as well as opportunities to participate in wellness programs, religious services, and recreational activities. Holmes was convicted in 2022 on 4 counts of fraud, in connection with their medical startup that duped investors out of millions of dollars. I even asked before, how is it possible that this one person scammed all these people out of their hard-earned dollars, fooled the world and all that? I mean, this person was everywhere, I would imagine, back then, right? In terms of doing, let's just say, speeches, interviews, and all that. And I can imagine the unfortunate thing in these situations too, which again would probably be true no matter what the topic is, where you could have people actually put out the facts afterwards, but because they invested so much in backing this person, it almost becomes like a religion or a cult afterwards, where it doesn't matter how much facts you show, because people invested so heavily on it, they started, let's just say, I don't know, attacking anyone else that shows the facts and all that. It's too embarrassing afterwards just to admit it, saying, okay, we were wrong. So they kind of just keep feeding like these, I don't know, fake gurus, fake it till you make it people, lobbyists, whatever you want to call it. That's the unfortunate thing. Because I often said before, you have to base things on consistency, and that's why I always say, even when it comes to things like drones, look from the very beginning, for example, who was against it from the very beginning, not trying to sell you something, for example, just to increase their bottom line. Alright, see you guys later.